Hi, you have no idea who I am, other than that my username's LudeDolphin21, but, um, House Season 8 premiere is on Monday, 2 days from today, and I was thinking of just showing off my House nerddom by making a huge video of recapping the entire series of House. Completely crazy to try to do this in 10 minutes, since that's like the YouTube video limit or something like that. So I'm going to try to just get started, and we'll see how far you get along. So, starting from Season 1, we see the first scene is like House being like, I'm avoiding work, I don't want to work on this patient, and then Wilson's like, you gotta treat her, because she is my cousin. And House does treat her, and it's revealed that he is an awesome doctor and badass, but a complete jerk to everyone. And it actually turns out Wilson lied to House because he just wanted House to get back to work, because we see that Cuddy was yelling at House for not doing anything but still getting paid and wasting the hospital's money. But of course, Cuddy never fired him for whatever reason, and the team was complaining that they aren't doing anything, although some of them were hired like last year, and Foreman especially was hired 2 weeks ago and still hasn't done anything. But thanks to that one case, everything's good in the world. And throughout the rest of Season 1, we find out that 1, House is a complete ass, 2, his limp comes from muscle, damn, I can't remember, infarction, muscle infarction of his thigh muscle, caused from a clot in the blood, or blood vessel in the leg, and he narrowly avoided amputation because he's a stubborn ass and did not want to have amputation, but it severely strained his relationship with his current girlfriend, uh, damn, Stacy, yeah, Stacy's girlfriend. Um, Strained his relationship with Stacy, and they ended up breaking up, although she does come back to work for the hospital in the Season 1 finale. We also find out that Cameron has the hots for House, that Chase has an accent, and that's pretty much it, and that, well, Foreman likes to be in charge. That Season 1 was mostly medicine related. Season 2, on the other hand, was more drama fest, because with Stacy not working in the hospital, House and Stacy, they have the hots for each other, but they don't really, but they do. And in like 12 episodes, they eventually, fall in love with each other again, much to Stacy's husband's dismay, because yes, this is a marital affair. And ultimately, Stacy leaves the hospital because she loves House, but is married, and because House does not want Stacy there, or something like that, because House wants to be miserable. Did I mention that House pops pills a lot? That's probably a big thing too. He pops Vicodin like no other. Foreman ends up in charge in the middle of the season because of a mistake made by Chase, where he accidentally did not look into a patient's stomach ache, which ultimately killed her after about 6 months, and the committee forgave Chase because he was completely distraught from the death of his father. But they blamed House for being a completely, kind of doctor that throws ethics out the window. So they decided to have Foreman in charge for a month. And while Foreman's in charge, House is still a complete ass and still forces Foreman to make the same decisions that House would have made anyway. So it's just kind of fun to see House being House while not being in charge. Chase's father died, like I said. That's the big plot development for Chase. Cameron, in this season, Cameron wrote an article, left it on House's desk to be proofread, was left there for 6 months, and in the meantime, Foreman writes the same article, and that gets published, and Cameron gets pissed at Foreman. And this is a 2-episode drama culminating when Foreman ends up getting infected with a disease a patient had that eventually the patient dies of, and House still has no idea what the disease is. And eventually Cameron decides to forgive Foreman since he's on his deathbed. Foreman calls his dad over to his deathbed, who is a devout religious person and completely unlike Foreman at all. Although we don't see Foreman's mother, who has Alzheimer's, show up. But eventually House saves the day again, and Foreman lives. spends the next episode thinking that, since he was so close to death that he's going to change his ways, but then House reveals that he won't change his ways, and eventually Foreman is like, yeah, you're right. I agree with you, House. And then the big season finale is House gets shot and hallucinates an entire episode. And it's actually one of my favorite episodes because it's so funny to see. But in the hallucination, he sees that if he is treated with ketamine, then he will be able to walk again without a limp. So when he wakes up from his hallucination, he tells Cuddy to treat him with ketamine. We don't realize how this works until the start of season 3, when he's running to work and his limb's completely gone and all is well and fine in the world. But then the first case they treat, House thinks he knows what it is, except Cuddy's like, no, you're not going to treat for this disease, even though it's a completely safe treatment, but I'm not going to do this because I need to show you I'm in charge. And House is like, okay. But eventually, it turns out House was right, but Cuddy did it behind his back and never told him, but House thinks he was wrong, and because of this, his mental things pop out, and he gets the lip back. His leg is in complete pain again, and he starts overdosing on Vicodin like no other. And eventually, he treats a police officer in the clinic without realizing this, and left a thermometer in his rectum because he didn't like this patient. Eventually, the police officer catches up to House while he was speeding on the motorcycle, catches all the Vicodin pills in his pocket, decides that he is a complete drug addict, and that he has to go to jail. And over the course of time, this person, Detective Tritter, absolutely is the most foul character on House I've ever seen, looks through everything, collecting all the Vicodin pills in the apartment, and eventually collects the big piece of evidence to throw House in jail, which is he finds a forged prescription note for Vicodin. And because of this, House is on the road to jail, but in the end, Deus Ex Machina, I think it's called, ending comes into play when Cuddy saves the day by saying that, she realized that House was overdosing on Vicodin, and so he swapped pills, and it's a complete, friendship thing. But in the end, House is still popping Vicodin, but he's not going to jail. Big plot things for characters in this season. I can't really remember any. I know there were a lot, so it's kind of deceptive, but I gotta move on. End of season 3, all the characters either quit or are fired. First, Foreman quits because he killed a patient accidentally, but he can't get over it because he realizes that he's turning in the House. And then House fires Chase, and then once Foreman leaves, Cameron is the only person left, but then Cameron leaves, and now House is all by himself. Start of season 4, House tries to treat a patient by himself, nearly fails, and Cuddy's like, you have to hire a team. So now we have a whole 8-episode stretch that resembles a reality TV show, and it's quite fun to watch. Big name characters, namely Taub, 13, and Kuttner are the big 3 that are hired. But also we have Cutthroat Bitch, who is my favorite character on the show because her name is Bitch. Actually, her nickname is Bitch. Her real name's Amber. But House can only hire 2 people, but manages to finagle a 3rd in, and Bitch is the last person cut out. And we eventually see that 13 has Huntington's, that Taub had an affair on his wife, and in order to keep his marriage, he decided to leave his current plastic surgery job and took up House's position, but eventually tells his wife anyway, Rachel. And Cuddy is put on the back burner for a moment. Wilson, I don't think anything happened, although in episode 12 or 13, it's revealed that actually Wilson and Bitch are dating, which is cool, 2 great House characters put together. Unfortunately, the season finale, which was absolutely great, involved House in a bus accident, but he realizes there's this patient here that's on the verge of dying. He can't figure out who this patient is or what was the symptom. Eventually he figures out that it was actually Bitch, Amber, Wilson's girlfriend, but we can't find her. Well, they find her in a nearby hospital, and she's very unconscious, on the brink of death, and House can't figure out why. Eventually, she dies. Not because of House's fault, but House finds out why she was dying. She ends up dying. Bitch is gone. Wilson is distraught. And yeah. Oh, and since Foreman ended up back on the team because he couldn't find a position anywhere, Cameron is now the head of the emergency room, and Chase is now a surgeon in the same hospital. So we still get to see the old team, although we see the new team more. Season 5, one of my favorite seasons, starts with Wilson leaving because he can't deal with House anymore, even though it wasn't completely House's fault. He still kind of has to get away from it all. Comes back like 2 episodes later. In the meantime, House had hired a private investigator, Lucas, to investigate things on Wilson and various coworkers and stuff, which is how he finds out that that Taub cheated on his wife, that Foreman is completely uninteresting, that Kuttner crawled 5 miles for something, I don't know what, and that 13 is, well, they figured out in the end of season 4 that 13 is bisexual. And that led to a great season, episode 5 or 6 episode where 13 is out at a lesbian bar, picks up a girl, has sex with her, and then patient is, or her lover for the day is convulsing on the floor. That was fun to watch, although that was a complete ratings scare, or ratings detractor or something like that, I guess. But eventually, Cuddy is trying to adopt a baby, and almost comes close to one, but fails, and is crying in her house. House walks in, and all of a sudden they kiss, and then they spend the next 10 episodes like trying to figure out, like, Cuddy wants a relationship, but House is being House, and nothing works out. And eventually it's just forgotten when Cuddy finally adopts another baby. I think the baby's name is Rachel. But I know that House's wife's name is Rachel too, so I'm getting these two confused now. But Cuddy adopts the baby, and then her whole relationship with House is forgotten for the rest of the episode or season. Kuttner commits suicide at one point, which is depressing. And the episode after that, House starts hallucinating. But he's not, wasn't shot this time, so now it's the Vicodin's fault. And he spends several episodes denying it's the Vicodin, but eventually decides it has to be the Vicodin. And he ends up trying to detox from it, but failing, until he brings Cuddy over to his house. And there, he detoxes successfully, and after the successful night of detoxing, he sleeps with Cuddy. But not really, because that was actually a hallucination too. And he doesn't find that out until the very last minutes of the episode of the season finale. And that was another great season finale. That actually the entire last 4 episodes of season 5 are great to watch, but the last scene where House realizes he hallucinated everything is absolutely great. Season 6 starts out with him in Mayfield Hospital, or Mayfield Rehab or something like that. He gets cleared of his Vicodin and he can go back to the hospital, but it takes about a month or so for him to get his medical license back. In the meantime, he just is a consultant for the cases that Foreman is leading. Bear in mind, the team is now Foreman, 13, and Taub. But only for 1 episode, because eventually Taub quits because he didn't want to work for Foreman, he wanted to work for House, and 13 is in a relationship with Foreman. Forgot to say this last season, but it's a big one. 13 and Foreman are in a relationship, nicknamed 14, and their relationship was great until Foreman started becoming the boss and 13 was working for Foreman, because now they can't work together well now that they're in a relationship, because now Foreman was trying to apply his boss style to their relationship, and it didn't work well with 13. So eventually Foreman fires 13, thinking that it will save the relationship. Haha, no, 13 gets pissed and leaves Foreman after about another 2 or 3 episode drama. So Foreman, in desperation, hires Cameron and Chase temporarily. And gosh, I forgot to say this, Chase and Cameron are now married. And they had started dating in season 3. They got engaged in the end of season 5, and their marriage was very close to their engagement, actually. And so now they're married, and now they're brought into the team with Foreman. However, the very first case that Foreman has is this African dictator that is planning on killing millions of people, which puts everyone in complete ethics dilemmas,